What's going on, guys? I'm CFB Kings, and welcome back to another episode of the CFBKings Show. Really appreciate you tuning in today. Week 4 was probably the best week that we've had so far this season. We had so many great games, so many late comebacks, a successful Hail Mary attempt, multiple ranked versus ranked matchups, potentially the best group of Friday night games that we've ever had in a week of college football, and we'll be breaking it all down today. Before we even got to Saturday's slate for Week 4, the 3 games on Friday night were absolutely incredible. Number 24 Illinois took down number 22 Nebraska in Lincoln, 31-24 in overtime, and this is one that I did not see coming whatsoever. In the preview episode last week, I said that I really didn't even think Illinois deserved to be ranked. I thought their ranking was skewed because of their win over Kansas, who was number 19 when the Illini beat them, but Kansas has dropped 2 more games since then, and is 1-3, I believe. But they certainly proved themselves. The Illini went into a crazy environment on Friday night. They ruined Nebraska's 400th consecutive sold-out game celebration and earned a very good win. This game flipped after a remarkable interception that was called both an interception and a touchdown by 2 refs on the field at the same time, where it looked like Isaiah Nayer for Nebraska had caught the ball in the end zone for a touchdown, but Illinois DB Torrey Cox ripped the ball away with one hand and earned the interception, and that loomed very large down the stretch. Illinois is now number 19, and they have a major matchup with number 9 Penn State next week, which could be very interesting to see how far they can take this momentum. Also on Friday night, while Illinois was beating Nebraska, Stanford was beating Syracuse for their first ever win in a conference game as a member of the ACC. This was another upset that I really didn't see coming at all. Syracuse and Kyle McCord looked great through the first couple weeks, but they were coming off a bye week too. They were rested. Stanford had to travel the entire width of the United States of America to play their first conference game in the ACC, but the Cardinal went into the JMA Dome and they got it done on a walk-off field goal as time expired. They are 1-0 in ACC play and next week travel back to the East Coast for a matchup with Clemson. Then after Illinois took down Nebraska and Stanford took down Syracuse, 1 game in overtime, 1 game on a walk-off field goal, then we had potentially the best game that we may see all season. San Jose State at Washington State was unbelievable. San Jose State entered the fourth quarter with a 38-24 lead, a 2-touchdown lead, but John Mateer and the Cougars battled back. They scored once and then scored a 36-yard touchdown that looked like it was going to tie things up, but after that touchdown, Washington State missed the extra point, so it was 38-37, a wide left extra point that would have tied the game in the fourth quarter, but the Cougars then got an interception right after that and then went and scored again to make it 43-38. Then the Spartans got the ball, drove down the field, and scored with 26 seconds left and converted their 2-point conversion to make it 46-43. So 46-43, Washington State gets the ball. They throw 1 deep completion, then they had a solid run, got into field goal range, and then Dean Janikowski drilled a 52-yard field goal to send it to overtime. In the first overtime, both teams threw interceptions. San Jose State got the ball first and threw an interception in the end zone. So Washington State gets it. All they have to do is get any points to win. Usually that's just 3 runs up the middle, get it into the center of the field, and kick a field goal to win. But for some reason, they came out throwing the ball, and Mateer was picked off at the goal line. And not the best coaching decision there, but and Washington State's head coach acknowledged that in the post-game interview. He was like, I got completely outcoached in this game, but yeah, they were able to pull off the win. So in the second overtime, both teams scored touchdowns. Washington State got the ball first. They scored and got the 2-point conversion. San Jose State gets the ball. They score, but then Washington State's defense comes up big and stops them on that 2-point conversion attempt. So the Cougars get the win, 54-52. They're 4-0 now on the season, and an absolutely amazing game on the CW that went until about 3 a.m. It felt like on the East Coast. But yeah, John Mateer had 501 total yards and 5 touchdowns, and we'll be talking about him again at the end of the episode. On Saturday, things picked up right where they left off on Friday night. We had number 18 Michigan take down number 11 USC in a 27-24 thriller. This game was back and forth all throughout the second half, but Michigan made just 1 or 2 more big plays and came out with the win. When I was previewing this game last week, I picked USC to win just due to the lack of what Michigan had put on the field through the first few weeks, but I was somewhat hesitant to pick against the Wolverines because of the situation of desperation that they were in. And all throughout this game on Saturday, that feeling of having their backs against the wall, trying to defend their home field, they're the defending national champs, they already lost once, and another one in all likelihood, especially in conference play, would pretty much finish off their hopes for the season. And you could feel that from the players, you could feel it from the fans, and they just willed their way to a victory. Now, Michigan still can't pass the ball, which is a major problem if they're going to accomplish anything that they set out to do this year. Alex Orji was 7 of 12 for 32 yards. Their 32 total passing yards as a team were their lowest that they've put up in a single game since 1987. They did get the running game going a little bit, though, with Mullings and somewhat with Edwards. Mullings had 17 carries for 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. Edwards had 14 carries for 74 yards and a touchdown. By far the most explosive offense that they've put on the field running-wise this year. Mullings and Edwards both looked good. That was a game that they very easily could have lost, though, and if USC makes one tackle on Mullings before he broke that 63-yard run on Michigan's final drive, that very easily could have gone the Trojans' way. But they've got to find something in the passing game if they're going to contend in the Big Ten or for an at-large college football playoff spot. For USC, the defense looked much improved, relatively speaking, from where they had been in previous years, but there was definitely still some tackling problems that looked like 2022 and 2023 at points, but including, on Mullings' 63-yard run, like I just mentioned. But outside of a few plays, they were certainly much better. Giving up 290 rushing yards is obviously never great, but there were things that they did throughout the game that at least demonstrated improvement compared to where they were before. And in seasons like 2023 and 2022, they started the year bad, and it almost felt like they got worse. Now it seems like they did good things against LSU. They got a shutout for the first time since 2011. They really played mostly good against Michigan, and it seems like they have something to build on moving forward. The offense was solid as well. Miller Moss, I think, had 3 passing touchdowns, and Woody Marks was great at running back, and the Trojans will still be a very intriguing team to watch in the Big Ten throughout the rest of the season. Number 12 Utah went into Boone Pickens Stadium with their backup quarterback and defeated number 14 Oklahoma State 22-19. And that score is a little deceiving. That was much closer than what the game really felt like. Oklahoma State had 2 touchdowns and 2 two-point conversions in the fourth quarter to make it closer. So they scored 16 points on their final 2 drives and still lost by 3. But this was a game that Utah controlled for the vast majority. In the absence of Cam Rising, backup quarterback Isaac Wilson was 17 of 29 for 207 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. And all things considered, he did pretty good filling in that void. Mekhi Bernard was huge at running back. He had 25 carries for 182 yards, averaging 7.3 yards per carry. Unlike Utah and Bernard, Oklahoma State could not get anything going in the running game. And last week in the preview, I said that Ollie Gordon needed to get things going, and he was going to be the key for the Cowboys if they were going to win this game. And here's a clip from last week's episode where I talk about just how many yards I thought he might need in order for the Cowboys to pull this off. So if Gordon can wear down that defensive front, be a threat, and open up more of that passing game, I think the Cowboys will win this game. If Gordon has 85 plus yards, if they can get him over 85, I think they'll get the job done. If Utah can keep Gordon to a 50 or 60 yard game like we've seen so far this season, I think that'll swing things in favor of the Utes. If Gordon had 85 plus yards, I thought they'd win. And I said if he was held to around 50 or 60, they'd probably lose. Well, he had 42 yards, 11 carries for 42 yards, and it's really hard to believe how much their running game has fallen since last year. The passing game, which had made up for their inability to run through the first 3 weeks, was not great on Saturday either. Bowman was 16 of 33 for 206 yards, 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And like I said before, the majority of those yards and both touchdowns came after Oklahoma State was down 22-3. Oklahoma State has been one of the more puzzling teams of the season so far, but if they're at some point able to figure out their running game, and if Ollie Gordon can return to even a little bit of how he played last year, then they can still be a solid team. Unfortunately for them, though, they don't really get a break. They have Kansas State next Saturday, which should be very interesting, a massive bounce-back opportunity for both programs. Speaking of Kansas State, BYU absolutely destroyed them 38-9 on Saturday night. BYU had a stretch in the middle of this game where they scored 31 points in 6.5 minutes of game time. They had 0 points with 2.5 minutes left in the second quarter, and then 31 points with 10:45 left in the third quarter. It was like they could do no wrong for the entire middle portion of this game. They had one of the most exciting punt return touchdowns I've ever seen. It was a 97-yard return by Parker Kingston, and that was really more like 150 yards if you consider that he ran backwards 30 yards to get the ball, and then across like almost the entire length of the field, and then 97. It was just absolutely ridiculous. For K-State, Avery Johnson was not at his best. He was 15 of 28 for 130 yards and 2 interceptions. He did have 74 rushing yards, but really couldn't get much going. And like I mentioned a minute ago, they don't get any time to regroup since they have Oklahoma State coming to town this week. BYU improved to 4-0, and after being picked to finish 13th in the Big 12 Media preseason poll, the Cougars have really made the most of this early portion of the season. They get Baylor next week and then have a bye week, and who knows what the rest of the season may hold for them. Number 6 Tennessee dominated number 15 Oklahoma. The final score was 25-15, but it really didn't even feel that close. The Vols completely stifled every offensive effort that Oklahoma tried to put together. This stat is absurd, but on Saturday against Tennessee, Oklahoma, as a team, had 34 carries for 36 yards. 34 carries for 36 yards. That is, by the slimmest of margins, barely over 1 yard per carry. And that includes sacks and stuff, like Jackson Arnold was. He had 5 carries for negative 21 yards. But still, even if you take that out, that's 29 carries for 57 yards, which isn't even 2 yards per carry. They were totally suffocated in everything that they tried to do. Jackson Arnold was 7 of 16 for 54 yards. He also had a fumble and an interception, and that was before he got benched. They brought in backup Michael Hawkins Jr., who did light somewhat of a spark for them late in the game, but by then it was already too far out of hand. Hawkins finished as both their leading passer and leading rusher. He went 11 of 18 for 132 yards and a touchdown passing, and then he had 22 yards rushing, which somehow led the team, but he was very close to having a rushing touchdown as well. The bad news for Oklahoma is that number 6 Tennessee, who has since moved up to number 5, isn't even in the top 3 of their hardest games of the year. And of course, all these rankings will change as SEC play starts, and they all play each other, like Georgia and Alabama, for example, they play this week. But Oklahoma still has number 1 Texas, number 4 Alabama, number 6 Ole Miss, number 11 Missouri, and number 14 LSU. They also have games like on the road at Auburn and against South Carolina as well. They have Auburn up next, and usually I'd say on the road in Jordan-Hare is pretty tough, but the Tigers are 0-2 against Power 4 teams at home this year, so maybe Oklahoma can earn a bounce-back win there, but that schedule doesn't offer many likely wins unless that offense turns around in a major way. For Tennessee, they are now in the AP top 5. Running back Dylan Sampson was great as usual. He had 92 yards and a touchdown. Iamaliava was pretty good. He did most of what they needed him to do in his first career road start. He was 13 of 21 for 194 yards and a touchdown. He did fumble twice, but overall he was pretty decent, all things considered. In the second best game of the week after Washington State, San Jose State, Colorado and Baylor had an unbelievable finish out in Boulder. Baylor led this game 24-10 early. It was a slower second half, a little bit less scoring in the second half than the first, but Colorado down 7 with a few seconds left. Shadur Sanders throws a rocket all the way down to the 2-yard line. Will Shepherd has the ball hit him right in the chest, but he drops it. I was watching this game live thinking, man, that was their shot. They were so close. It was right there. No way they get a receiver that open again with the ability to catch a ball. It's a Hail Mary attempt. It's like a 1 in 100, 1 in 500, something like that type of chance. But Sanders then rolled to his left, launched another one downfield, and somehow LeJontay Wester was able to get his hands under it in the end zone to tie the game as regulation expired. Colorado then went on to win in overtime after Baylor fumbled like 1 inch, literally an inch away from the goal line. Travis Hunter made a phenomenal hit and popped the ball out to secure a 38-31 victory. The Buffaloes now have a major test coming up on the road at UCF. The Knights have been running the ball like crazy this season, and we'll see if Colorado can potentially keep this momentum going. That was a gut-wrenching loss for Baylor, and unfortunately for the Bears, they have 3 ranked opponents in their next 4 games, including number 22 BYU this week, and the only one of those 4 that isn't ranked is Texas Tech, who's also played really well over the past couple weeks. So we'll see if Dave Aranda's squad can potentially rebound with an upset win or 2. A couple other notable results real quick. Buffalo took out number 23 Northern Illinois 23-20 in overtime. Tough loss for the Huskies as well as for Notre Dame, who would have benefited from NIU staying ranked and making that loss not look quite as bad. But tough blow for the Huskies and their shot of being able to be that G5 representative in the CFP. Number 19 Louisville beat Georgia Tech 31-19. This was the Cardinals' first Power 4 opponent, and they looked pretty solid. This was also a matchup that I mentioned in the preview where Georgia Tech came into this week having played 2 more games than Louisville. Georgia Tech had played 4 games. Louisville had only played 2. Louisville hadn't played a Power 4 team. Georgia Tech had already played Syracuse and Florida State. So there are some interesting circumstances regarding level of competition and just on-field experience that greatly benefited Georgia Tech. But the Cardinals earned the win. They are now 1-0 in ACC play and have since moved up to number 15 in the AP Top 25. James Madison dropped a nuke in Chapel Hill, North Carolina on Saturday. The Dukes beat the Tar Heels 70-50. Yes, 70-50, and yes, in football. JMU quarterback Alonzo Barnett was phenomenal. He had 7 touchdowns. I'll leave the rest of his stats for the end of the episode because I'll let you in on a secret. He's one of the Kings of the Week. But James Madison was incredible. They had 53 points at the half. They blocked a punt and returned it for a touchdown. They had a pick 6. They had a 69-yard passing touchdown and overall outplayed North Carolina in just about every way. UNC is on their 3rd quarterback in 4 games. Jacoby Criswell threw 2 picks, including that pick 6, but he did have 475 passing yards, which is pretty notable. Omarion Hampton had 19 carries for 139 yards and 3 touchdowns. Frequently the bright spot for that offense, but who knows? Maybe that Criswell and Hampton duo might be something that they can build off of, but defensively they might just need to start from scratch. Florida defeated Mississippi State 45-28 on Saturday. A solid win for the Gators over a suffering Bulldogs team. Miss State got blown out by Toledo in Week 3. They lost by 17 to Florida last week, and it seems like it would be a welcome time for a bye week or for an FCS opponent or something. But they played number 1 Texas on Saturday. The Bulldogs are a 38-point underdog in a conference game this week. So it's a little bit of a disaster there right now in Starkville. The train has sort of gone off the tracks early in Jeff Lebby's first season, but not ideal. Florida at least seems to have found some rhythm on offense. They got back on track a little bit. Graham Mertz was 19 of 21 passing, which is 90.4%, and accounted for 225 total yards and 4 total touchdowns. It seemed yesterday like they did kind of make a move back to Mertz after switching between Lagway and Mertz every other drive in the Texas A&M game, which didn't work out well at all. Lagway did get in for 1 or 2 drives, I think, in Saturday's game, but it seems like they have made somewhat of a move back to Mertz as QB1. Vanderbilt took number 7 Missouri down to the wire in a double overtime thriller. The Tigers escaped with a 30-27 victory after Vanderbilt shanked a field goal in that second overtime. But during that game, the ESPN win probability chart gave Vanderbilt a 95.9% chance to win. But Missouri clawed their way back, and they found a way to win it. The Tigers have since dropped to number 11 in the AP poll, and now they head into what appears to be a very well-timed bye week. All right, next up, I wanted to bring some attention to last week's picks because this was one of the best weeks that I've ever put together. In the Week 4 preview episode, I shared a few of the lines that I was looking at for this week, and apparently I had a pretty solid read on things because those picks went 7-1. We had South Alabama at App State under 62.5. That hit at 62. Cut it real close. South Alabama actually missed an extra point in that game, so we lucked out, but still counts. Clemson minus 20.5 against NC State. A lot of these lines are actually different from what I had them at. I waited up until Saturday morning for a lot of them, so actually I had Clemson at 18.5, but the Tigers picked up right where they left off against App State in week 2 and won 59-35. They led this game 52-7, but their third and fourth string that they had in late was really unimpressive. NC State scored 28 in the fourth quarter, but the Tigers still covered with a 24-point win. Clemson team total over 32.5. They had 28 in the first quarter and hit that number very early in the second quarter. Then West Virginia minus 2.5. I had West Virginia minus 1 on Saturday morning, but they trailed by 11 at one point in that game, but pulled off a couple late touchdowns to earn a 32-28 victory. Arkansas State at Iowa State under 51.5. This was the only loser of the week. Iowa State won this game 52-7, so over by 8 points. The Cyclones did their job on defense, but Arkansas State just didn't have much of an answer to stop anything. Virginia minus 3.5 at Coastal Carolina. They won by 19, 43-24, and Virginia team total over 30.5. They had 43. And UConn minus 2.5 against FAU. The Huskies won by 31, 45-14. And I also had Texas Tech minus 2.5 over Arizona State. I tweeted that one out on Saturday morning. That also covered with an 8-point Red Raider win. I don't know why all those lines stood out to me like they did, but I'm glad I went with my gut. 8-1 in week 4, so make sure to watch the week 5 preview episode to see if we can keep the momentum going. All right, now it's time for Kings of the Week, a segment where I highlight some of the best performances across college football each and every week. We'll start with James Madison quarterback Alonzo Barnett. Like I mentioned earlier, he was phenomenal in the Duke 70-50 victory over North Carolina. He was 22 of 34 for 388 yards and 5 touchdowns. That alone is pretty good and would probably get you on Kings of the Week. And then he had 13 carries for 99 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns as well. 487 total yards, 7 total touchdowns, 70 points on a Power 4 team. Just a massive day for Barnett and the Dukes. And James Madison, with teams like Northern Illinois and Memphis and others losing, they have separated themselves a little bit from the rest of the group of 5 pack. And along with UNLV and Navy, they look like a contender for that group of 5 college football playoff spot. Speaking of Navy, the Midshipmen took down Memphis in a wild 56-44 shootout. Navy quarterback Blake Horvath was 9 of 12 passing for 192 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not too bad, right? Well, then he had 12 carries for 211 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns, 403 total yards, 6 total touchdowns, a completion percentage of 75%, and 17.6 yards per carry. Blake Horvath put up video game numbers on Saturday. Sean Dolak, a senior linebacker at Buffalo, had one of the most dominant defensive performances I've seen not only this season, but in a very long time. In an upset victory over number 23 Northern Illinois, Dolak had 19 total tackles, 15 of which were solo tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 1 pass deflection, and an interception that he returned 53 yards to set up a Buffalo field goal that eventually ended up sending the game to overtime. He was an absolute monster, and the Bulls probably aren't anywhere close to winning that game without him. And lastly, we have Washington State quarterback John Mateer. He was insane in that Friday night thriller with San Jose State. He threw for 390 yards and 4 touchdowns, and then also led the team in rushing yards with 18 carries for 111 yards and a touchdown as well. 501 total yards, 5 total touchdowns, and a victory in what will probably end up being one of the best games of the entire season. That's going to wrap up this episode of the show. Really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. Week 4 was amazing, best week of the season so far, and here's to hoping that it gets even better in week 5. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube, follow if you're listening on Spotify, and make sure to follow at CFBKings on Twitter and Instagram for all things college football. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and take care.